Friends, please check if you're already subscribed to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us. We need to reach 1,000 subscribers to generate income and continue with the channel. Now, let's get to the video. I remember the exact sound the room made when my name was called. Not applause. Not cheers. Just the soft scrape of chairs, the nervous coughs of strangers, and the echo of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stood up anyway. Because that's what you do when you've waited your whole life for something. I smoothed my dress, the one my mother said was nice, but maybe too much, and walked toward the stage with my chin high, even though my eyes kept drifting to the third row on the left. 2 empty seats. They had promised they'd be there. They swore. My parents. I had called them that morning, my voice shaking with excitement I tried not to show. I was 32 years old, but in that moment I felt 12 again, begging them to care. "Don't be late," I said. "We wouldn't miss it," my dad replied. "This is your big day." He said it so easily. What he didn't say, what he didn't think mattered, was that there was a playoff game that afternoon. A game he'd been talking about for weeks. A game my mother had already planned snacks for, like it was a holiday. I didn't want to believe they would choose that over me. So I didn't. The announcer handed me the microphone. My palms were slick with sweat, but I smiled. I always smiled. That was my role in the family, the easy one, the understanding one, the one who never made things uncomfortable. I want to thank everyone who supported me through this journey, I began. My voice sounded steady. Calm. A lie. Because all I could think was, they should be here. I scanned the room one more time. Still empty. No last-minute rush. No apologetic wave. Nothing. That's when it hit me, not like a punch, but like a slow, suffocating pressure in my chest. They didn't forget. They chose. I finished the speech on autopilot. People clapped. Someone shouted my name. A woman I barely knew hugged me afterward and said, "Your parents must be so proud." I laughed. A short, sharp sound that didn't belong to me. Later that night, when the building was quiet and the adrenaline had worn off, my phone finally buzzed. "Mom, sorry we missed it, baby. The game went into overtime. You understand, right?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Yeah. I understand. And that was the moment something inside me shifted, subtle, almost invisible, like a crack forming beneath a foundation no one ever checks until the house starts to sink. I didn't know it then, but that empty seat wasn't just about that day. It was a pattern. A warning. And the beginning of a debt they would come to collect, when they needed something from me. If this already feels familiar, hit like. Sometimes the stories that hurt the most are the ones we recognize too quickly. The thing about disappointment is that it rarely arrives alone. It brings its friends. Memory. Pattern. Clarity you didn't ask for. After that day, I tried to move on the way I always had, by minimizing myself. By telling the story in a way that made them sound reasonable and me sound dramatic if I lingered on it too long. They had a game, I told people. It wasn't that serious. They didn't mean it like that. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and my phone stopped lighting up, my mind did something dangerous. It rewound. I saw myself at 8 years old, standing on a school stage in a stiff yellow dress, scanning the crowd for familiar faces that never showed. They had work, my mother said later, distracted, already half watching television. At 15, waiting after my first debate tournament, trophy in hand, watching other kids take photos with their parents while I pretended I didn't care. They thought it ended later, my dad explained. At 22, graduation day. They came, technically, but left early because traffic was bad and they wanted to beat the rush. You know how we are, Mom laughed. You'll understand one day. I always understood. That was the problem. Understanding became my survival skill. My emotional currency. The thing I offered so freely that no one ever thought to give me anything back. So when my phone rang 2 weeks after my big day, I answered without hesitation. Hey, sweetheart, my mom said, her voice unusually soft. How are you? That should have been my first clue. My parents didn't call to ask how I was. Not unless something else was coming. I'm fine, I said. What's up? There was a pause. A breath exchanged on the other end, the kind of silent coordination that told me this was rehearsed. Well, my dad cut in, we were hoping to talk to you about something important. Important. That word had weight in my family. It usually meant urgent or inconvenient or we need you to be mature about this. We're thinking of refinancing the house, my mom continued. Things have been a little tight. Tight. I sat down slowly. They explained it in pieces. Circumstances. Timing. Market conditions. How it would only be temporary. How responsible I was. How proud they were of me, suddenly, emphatically proud, now that I was doing so well. We just need a favor, my dad said. There it was. A favor. I stared at the wall across from me, noticing a crack I hadn't seen before. Thin. Jagged. Running straight down like a fault line. They had missed my biggest day without blinking. But now they were here. Fully present. Voices warm. Attention focused. Because they needed something. Of course, I heard myself say, even as my chest tightened. Tell me what you need. After we hung up, I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling something unfamiliar coil in my stomach. Not sadness. Not even anger. Something sharper. Something that whispered, they always show up when it benefits them. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I didn't. They didn't ask all at once. That's how they did things, slow, careful, wrapped in affection so it wouldn't feel like pressure. Like if they eased into it gently enough, I wouldn't notice the weight settling onto my shoulders. First, it was just paperwork. Can you look this over? My dad asked. You're better with this stuff, my mom added. Then it was my credit. Just cosign, Mom said lightly. It's basically symbolic. Symbolic. That word should have sent me running. I told myself I was being paranoid. I reminded myself they were my parents. That this was what family did, showed up for each other when it mattered. Even though, deep down, I knew they had skipped the moments that mattered to me. I signed. I justified it in 100 quiet ways. They raised me. They sacrificed. I owe them. That last one stuck the hardest. Because it had been planted in me early, the idea that love was a debt, and I was always behind on payments. Weeks passed. Then months. The calls became more frequent. Shorter. More transactional. Can you transfer it today? Did you check the account? We need a little more time. Each request slid seamlessly into the next, until I couldn't tell where help ended and obligation began. One night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, numbers glowing back at me like a quiet accusation. My savings, the ones I had built brick by brick, were shrinking. Meanwhile, my parents' social media was full of smiling photos. Game nights. New TV. Weekend trips. Nothing extravagant. Nothing they couldn't explain away. But enough to make my stomach twist. I brought it up carefully. I just wanted to check in, I said over the phone. About the timeline. There was a shift, subtle but unmistakable. My mom sighed. I thought you trusted us. My dad cleared his throat. We didn't raise you to be like this. Like this. Cautious. Aware. Tired. The guilt hit right on cue, heavy and familiar. The kind that made me feel small, ungrateful, selfish, for daring to notice imbalance. So I backed down. Again. But something had changed. I started replaying that empty seat in my mind. The way they didn't even sound sorry. The way overtime mattered more than my once-in-a-lifetime moment. And now here I was, rearranging my life so theirs wouldn't be inconvenienced. That night, I whispered a question into the dark I had never let myself ask before. What if being a good daughter has a price I can't afford anymore? I didn't have the answer yet. But I was getting closer. The first real crack showed up on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a notification. I was in line at the grocery store when my phone buzzed with an alert from my bank. At first, I assumed it was another routine transfer, one of those things I'd stopped reacting to. Then I saw the amount. My breath caught. It wasn't small. It wasn't accidental. It was precise, intentional, the kind of number you move when you're confident no one will stop you. I abandoned my cart and stepped outside, hands shaking as I called my parents. It rang longer than usual. Finally, my dad answered. Hey, kiddo. Kiddo. Did you authorize a withdrawal from my account? I asked. Silence. Then my mom's voice in the background. Muffled. Defensive. It was urgent, she said, finally taking the phone. We were going to tell you. Going to. When? My voice was quiet, but something in it surprised even me. Steady. Sharp. We didn't think you'd react like this, she replied. You're usually so understanding. There it was again. That word they use like a leash. I felt something in me snap, not loudly, not all at once, but enough to change how everything after would feel. You didn't ask, I said. You just took it. We're your parents, my dad said, firm now. This isn't stealing. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't, I might scream. This was supposed to be temporary, I said. You promised. Promises. They shifted, then. The warmth drained from their voices, replaced by irritation. You're doing fine, my mom said. Why are you acting like this is hurting you? Because it was hurting me. Financially. Emotionally. Psychologically. But they didn't see that. Or maybe they did, and it just didn't matter. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation, realizing something that made my chest ache. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a resource. And once I recognized that, I couldn't unsee it. The empty seat at my big day. The sudden interest when money was involved. The guilt when I questioned them. It all connected. By morning, I made a decision I had never made before. I would stop absorbing the damage quietly. I just didn't know yet how much that decision was going to cost me, or how far they'd go once I stopped being useful. Saying no didn't happen in a big, cinematic moment. It happened quietly. In my kitchen. With my phone face down on the table, vibrating like it was angry at me. I had rehearsed the words all morning. Out loud. In my head. In the shower, where my voice shook less because no one could hear it. I can't do this anymore. I need to protect myself. This has gone too far. Every version sounded reasonable. Every version still made my stomach knot. When I finally picked up the phone, my mother didn't even say hello. We need you to send another transfer today, she said. The deadline moved. No greeting. No apology. Just expectation. I closed my eyes. I can't, I said. The silence on the other end was immediate and heavy, the kind that presses against your ears. What do you mean, you can't? My dad asked. I mean, I can't keep giving money, I replied. You took funds without asking. That crossed a line. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. You're overreacting, my mom snapped. We said we'd pay it back. You didn't ask, I repeated. And I need it. This is affecting my life. That was the moment the tone shifted completely. No more softness. No more praise. You've changed, my dad said. And not for the better, my mom added. There it was. The punishment for boundaries. They reminded me of everything they'd done for me. Every sacrifice. Every bill. Every favor from decades ago, dragged into the present like evidence in a trial I never agreed to stand in. You wouldn't even be where you are without us, my mom said. I swallowed. Maybe once, that would have broken me. But now all I could think about was that empty seat. That quiet room. That message about overtime. I'm not saying no forever, I said carefully. I'm saying no right now. You're being selfish, she replied without hesitation. Selfish. The word echoed long after the call ended. I sat there, shaking, waiting for the guilt to crush me the way it always did. But it didn't. Instead, something else took its place. Relief. It was small. Fragile. But real. For the first time, I had chosen myself, and the world didn't end. What I didn't realize yet was that my no wasn't just a boundary. To them, it was a betrayal. And they were about to make sure I paid for it. If you've ever been afraid to say no, but did it anyway, hit like. You're stronger than you think. The retaliation didn't come as a scream. It came as silence. Days passed without a call. No, good morning. No check-in. No passive-aggressive emojis from my mother. It was like I'd been quietly erased, and somehow, that hurt more than the yelling ever would have. I told myself to enjoy the peace. I tried. But the quiet wasn't empty. It was loaded. By the end of the week, the first text arrived. Mom, we're really disappointed in you. No context. No explanation. Just a sentence designed to land exactly where it always had, right in my chest. I didn't respond. An hour later, another message. Dad, your mother's been crying all day. I hope you're happy. There it was. The familiar weight. The old instinct to fix, to apologize, to make it right, even when I wasn't wrong. I set the phone down and paced my apartment, my thoughts spiraling. Am I being cruel? Am I overreacting? Is this just how families are? Then I remembered the bank alert. The unauthorized withdrawal. The way they'd spoken to me once I stopped being convenient. That night, my aunt called. I didn't want to get involved, she said immediately, which is always how involvement begins. But your parents are really struggling. I listened as she repeated their version of the story, carefully edited, painfully familiar. How I'd abandoned them. How money had changed me. How they were shocked I'd turned my back on family. No mention of consent. No mention of boundaries. No mention of that empty seat. They're embarrassed, my aunt continued. They told people you promised to help and then backed out. My stomach dropped. They weren't just pressuring me. They were rewriting me. I hung up and sat on the floor, back against the couch, realizing the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't about money. It was about control. As long as I said yes, I was the good daughter. The success story. The proof they'd done something right. The moment I said no, I became ungrateful. Cold. Disloyal. They didn't miss me. They missed access. And once I saw that, the sadness I felt transformed into something harder. Resolve. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Transfers. Messages. Dates. Amounts. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I finally understood something crucial. People who use love as leverage don't stop when you ask nicely. They stop when you make it impossible to continue. If you're still with me, subscribe. The next part is where the truth comes out, publicly. I didn't plan to find out the truth the way I did. It found me. I was at work when a colleague, someone I barely spoke to outside polite hellos, approached my desk with an awkward smile. "Hey, can I ask you something kind of personal?" My stomach tightened. "Sure," I said. She hesitated. "Your parents, are they okay?" The question felt innocent. The tone was not. "They mentioned you at a community event my mom went to," she continued quickly, like she regretted opening her mouth. "They said you'd been under a lot of pressure lately. That you weren't yourself. Not yourself." I felt heat rush to my face. "What exactly did they say?" I asked. She shifted. "Just that you'd promised to help them out, financially, and then, disappeared. That they were worried about you." Worried. I thanked her and waited until she walked away before standing up and locking myself in the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, my eyes wide, jaw clenched, and finally understood the scale of what they were doing. They weren't just painting themselves as victims. They were painting me as unstable. The reliable daughter. The successful one. Suddenly fragile. Erratic. Ungrateful. All because I stopped paying. I went home that night and listened to the voice notes my mother had sent me but I hadn't opened. One by one. Her voice cracked in all the right places. Her pauses were perfectly timed. "If I did something wrong, I wish you'd just tell me. I don't even recognize you anymore. I don't know how we failed you so badly." Failed me. The irony almost took my breath away. I realized then that this wasn't impulsive. It was strategic. A preemptive strike. If I ever spoke up, if I ever exposed the truth, they'd already laid the groundwork. She's confused. She's emotional. She's been acting strange. And for the first time, fear crept in. Not of them. Of how many people would believe them. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, documents spread out in front of me, phone buzzing with unanswered messages. And that's when the question changed. It was no longer should I protect them. It was how do I protect myself, when the people who raised me are willing to erase me to save themselves. I knew then there was no going back to silence. Only forward, through whatever came next. If you're still here, hit like. What they do next forces my hand. They showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon. No warning. No text. No call. Just a knock, firm, confident, like they still had the right. I stood on the other side of the door for a long moment, my heart thudding, my hand hovering over the lock. A younger version of me would have opened it immediately, already apologizing. This version took a breath first. When I opened the door, my mother smiled like nothing had happened. There it was. That smile. The one she used in public. The one that said loving mother even when her eyes were sharp, assessing. "Hi, baby," she said, stepping forward as if she expected a hug. I didn't move. My dad cleared his throat. "We thought it'd be better to talk face to face." Of course they did. They sat at my kitchen table like they belonged there, looking around my apartment with that familiar mix of pride and entitlement. "You've done well for yourself," my mom said. "We always knew you would." Always. I poured myself water. "Not them. We're in a bit of a bind," my dad said, getting straight to it. "The bank's asking questions. About the transfers." My grip tightened around the glass. "They want documentation," my mom added quickly. "A letter stating the money was a gift. Not a loan." There it was. The favor. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just another request, bigger than the last. "If you don't help us," my dad continued, "this could get very serious." I looked at them, really looked. At the way my mother's hand rested calmly on the table while asking me to lie. At the way my father avoided my eyes. "You want me to say the money was a gift," I said slowly. "Yes," my mom replied. "That's what family does." Family. I thought about the empty seat again. The overtime text. The way they'd spoken about me behind my back. "No," I said. The word landed heavy. My mother's smile vanished instantly. "Think carefully," she said. "This affects all of us." "I have," I replied. "For a long time." My dad stood up abruptly. "After everything we've done for you." "I know," I interrupted, my voice steady. "That's why this ends now." The room felt smaller. Tighter. My mother leaned in, her voice low. "If you do this, don't expect us to protect you." "Protect me from what?" They left without another word. That night, my phone exploded with messages. Extended family. Old friends. People who hadn't spoken to me in years. They weren't asking questions. They were choosing sides. And I realized something chilling as I stared at the screen. They didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because they needed one last thing. And by saying no, I had just made myself their enemy. If you've ever been pressured to lie to protect someone who hurt you, hit like. The next part is where everything breaks open. I didn't expose them. Not at first. The truth came out the way it always does, messy, uncontrolled, dragged into the light by consequences no one planned for. 2 weeks after they came to my apartment, I received an official-looking envelope in the mail. My name was on it. So was theirs. I sat on the couch, envelope unopened, my hands trembling as a familiar dread settled in my stomach. The kind that told me something irreversible had already begun. Inside was a notice from the bank. An investigation. Not just into them, into me. Because my name was attached to everything. They hadn't told me that part. I called my mother immediately. She didn't answer. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. That's when it clicked. They hadn't wanted my letter to protect themselves. They wanted it to protect me from being questioned, because if I spoke, if I told the truth, the entire story they'd built would collapse. I contacted a lawyer that afternoon. Sitting in that office, explaining everything out loud, the missed milestones, the pressure, the unauthorized transfers, felt like stepping outside my body. The lawyer listened quietly, then said something that stunned me. "You're not in trouble," she said. "But you were being set up to be." That sentence rang in my ears all the way home. They weren't just willing to damage my reputation. They were willing to let me take the fall. I gathered every document I had. Every message. Every voice note. I submitted everything the bank requested, calmly, clearly, without embellishment. No revenge. No dramatics. Just truth. When my parents finally called, their voices were panicked. "You talked to them?" my mom demanded. "I told the truth," I replied. There was shouting then. Accusations. Tears that sounded real enough to fool anyone who didn't know her the way I did. "You've destroyed this family," she cried. I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to fix what they broke. The investigation moved quickly after that. And so did the fallout. Family members who had stopped speaking to me suddenly went quiet, then distant, then apologetic. The story was changing. And this time, they weren't in control of it. I stood in my apartment that night, staring at the city lights outside my window, feeling something unexpected rise in my chest. Not victory. Freedom. Because whatever happened next, whatever bridges burned, I had finally stepped out of the role they'd written for me. And I wasn't going back. If you're still here, subscribe. The final part is where everything comes full circle. The bank closed the investigation quietly. No courtrooms. No headlines. Just consequences. The transfers were flagged. The timeline didn't match their story. The letter they wanted me to write, the one I refused, would have been the lie that buried me. Instead, the truth did what it always does. It landed where it was supposed to. My parents lost the refinance. The house they'd treated like an untouchable symbol of stability suddenly wasn't so stable anymore. Conversations I wasn't invited to happened behind closed doors. Plans changed. And somehow, in all of it, they never apologized. Not once. The last message I got from my mother read, "I hope one day you understand why we did what we did." I stared at the screen and realized something simple, devastating, and freeing. I already did. I understood perfectly. They did it because they could. Because I had always said yes. Because they believed love meant access without accountability. I didn't reply. Weeks later, I attended another ceremony, a smaller one, quieter, but still mine. I arrived early, sat in the third row on the left, and let myself notice the empty seats beside me. This time, they didn't hurt. They felt intentional. Afterward, a woman struck up a conversation with me. She asked if my parents were proud of me. I smiled. "I'm proud of me," I said. And for the first time, it was enough. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed that first big day in my mind, the one with the empty seats and the overtime game. Back then, I thought absence meant indifference. Now I know better. Absence can be a gift. It shows you exactly who's willing to show up when it counts, and who only arrives when they want something from you. They missed my big day. But I didn't miss the lesson. And I never will.